Alright, so we've got a bunch of news. 3 smaller stories. Okay, maybe one of them is actually a pretty big story, which is prompting me to make this video in the first place. But we've got 3 stories. I wanted to dive into all of them here because they all revolve around some pretty big market teams. So I want to try to cash in on those YouTube views, baby. Anyways, let's talk today about the most recent news at the end. So, chronological order, we're starting out with the most further back news. The Montreal Canadiens have loaned forward Lucas Condotta to the Laval Rocket. And the funny part is, a lot of people were responding to this with this sort of sentiment like, hey, wait a minute, I didn't even realize that Lucas Condotta was a Montreal Canadiens rostered player. And that certainly is a fair assessment to bring up with this conversation, but the fact is, for one day at the very least, Lucas Condotta, 26-year-old forward in the Montreal Canadiens system, was a part of the system. He had played 6 games with Laval this season, he's got 3 points, he had 65 games with Laval last season, 19 points. He also is the captain of Laval right now, which is pretty great. But he did get called up yesterday for the Montreal Canadiens for a very particular reason. Not necessarily because he is, like, really, really good or whatever. I mean, he's not necessarily tearing up the AHL now, isn't he? But as a 26-year-old, 6'1", 223-pound left-handed center, he was brought up to Montreal as insurance. It's pretty much explained here well by Little Mac. They called him up to play in case Josh Anderson was injured and couldn't play yesterday. Well, guess what? Anderson played, and it's fine. So for Lucas Condotta, at the very least, this is great for him to have had that 1 day's worth of NHL salary. I mean, if you do the math here, the guy's making $775,000 in the NHL, $225,000 in the AHL. So for the 1 day that he was up with Montreal, he got, what is that? 2, 3 times the salary than he would have gotten? Now, sure, it's only for 1 day, but everything piles up over the course of a calendar year, right? So getting $775,000 worth of a salary for 1 day's worth of work, where he didn't even have to play, pretty good. Pretty good reward for a guy who has been in the Canadiens organization for a while now. Definitely don't have any problems here with Lucas Condotta, especially after his days with the UMass Lowell system in the NCAA. But this is just one of the 3 stories that I wanted to talk about in this video. The other ones are written about over here too on Twitter. Take a look at this. We had ourselves a really big recalling from the New York Rangers. Matt Rempe is back, ladies and gentlemen. And a lot of people were going out there and talking about him getting sent down to the AHL as many things. A lot of Rangers fans I saw were talking about how this guy needs playing time, how he needs to actually get himself a role, he needs to get his feet going, not necessarily because he's bad, but because, you know, he had 2 games played, didn't really do much, he didn't even have any penalty minutes, which is interesting. He got sent down, played a little bit, and was able to get his feet wet with a -3, I guess. Yeah, he didn't even really get too much playing time in the 2 NHL games that he had. 3 minutes in the 5-6, or 6-5, excuse me, loss at the hands of the Utah Hockey Club, and then 7 minutes in the 4-1 win against Toronto. Matt Rempe hasn't necessarily been the shot out of a cannon-like fireball of a player that we have seen in the past. He hasn't been taking up all the headlines in the stories of NHL lore this previous year. But he has been a guy who has had a very defined player profile and who kind of needs a little bit of work, I would say, to bring that and maybe even more out of him so far this year. So the small stint he had in the AHL, I guess it was just to get his feet wet and to just kind of hopefully get in the groove of playing consistently paced hockey. But hey, never mind that. He's back up with the Rangers, so this will be in time for New York to go out there and start trying to capitalize on what was a really hot start to the season. They've now got Rempe back in here. I wonder if this has to do with any of the games that are going to be going on. I mean, let's just go out there and read some of these replies here. Gotta play against the Capitals, I guess. Okay, that's pretty great. Over under 5 minutes time on ice. That's really funny. Anyways, there are some people going out there and talking about this as a bad thing, too. Feel bad for the kid. Drury and Laviolette claim to want to help his development, but instead they make him look like a buffoon. Please send him back down before Wednesday. Who's hurt? Yeah, this is pretty interesting, but I guess we'll see how he is deployed in the upcoming game to justify whether or not it was really worth it for him to get called up. But anyways, those are two stories down. I wanted to talk about the one big story that put itself out here. Jake McCabe has signed a beefy contract extension with the Toronto Maple Leafs. 5 years, $4.51 million AAV. However, the money isn't directly the way that Frank Seravalli talks about it. 5 years, 4.51 equals a $20.5 million contract. Not necessarily. There is money deferred as a part of the deal between years 2 and years 3 of the extension, which drops the AAV from 4.7-ish to 4.51. And we also had ourselves Bartlett Hockey going out there and saying that, hey, while McCabe's cap hit is 4.51, the deal is actually $23.5 million over 5 years, which is a $4.7 million AAV at face value. There is some deferred money to bring down the cap while increasing the take-home pay and maximizing tax efficiency. Then people are going out there and asking, like, okay, I don't understand the tax deferred part or whatever. This is what the Hurricanes did with Seth Jarvis, pretty sure, so there's a lot going on here. Essentially, the Leafs are saving some dollars AAV-wise on Jake McCabe, a guy who has been one of the more underrated defensemen in the NHL the past few years. That shortened season that he had where he was hurt for the entirety of it, which, when was that? Not 2024, 2025. The one before, there you go, 2020, 2021 with Buffalo. That season, Jake McCabe was a very strange analytical freak because he was one of the best defensemen in the NHL in terms of some of the defensive shutdown metrics. So for me personally, watching Jake McCabe go from that to Chicago, I was like, okay, the Blackhawks are getting a really, really amazing defenseman, and he was good enough that he actually got picked up by the Maple Leafs, and for 2 straight seasons was able to provide solid play for them. Okay, more like a season and a half, I guess, because of the 22-23 transition. But anyways, Jake McCabe is a solid guy. He gets hits. He's physical. 31 years old, 6'1", left-handed guy, 212 pounds. He is certainly one of the more defensively minded players on this blue line in Toronto. And signing him to a 5 by $4-something million deal, I'd say it's actually pretty reasonable considering that he could have gotten $5 million or more on the free agent market. His current contract is expiring at the end of this season, so he kind of needed the pay raise. So for Brad Treliving to go out there and get this done right now, it's some tidy work here for the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that has been sort of questioning their future cap-wise the next few years here, what with Mitch Marner and John Tavares and all the conversations about some of their top superstars, whether or not their contracts are really worth it. This one, though, I'd say it's pretty worth it compared to the others around the team. Jake McCabe, pretty reasonable dollar amount, $4.51 million for 5 years, expiring in 2029, I guess? Is that it? Can I do the math right? No, 2030, I think. Yeah, so 2025, 2026, 7, 8, 9... 29-30. That's exactly what it is. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about each of these 3 stories. The Montreal Canadiens sending Lucas Condotta back down to the Laval Rocket after calling him up very briefly. Thoughts on Matt Rempe getting recalled, and then the Jake McCabe extension. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on, and bye.